Second question, so many shots for kids these days, and a lot of parents wonder, is it just too much? Well, you should know that although the number of actual shots that your children are receiving are many more than they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, actually the number of parts of these vaccines that activate the immune system has actually decreased. And this happens because of our research and our knowledge of what parts of viruses and bacteria activate those memory B cells and memory T cells. It's also important that the number of microbes that are just here and that children face far outnumber these different components in vaccines that activate the immune system. So upon birth, newborns are coming from a sterile environment of the womb into an environment with trillions of bacteria. And I don't want to scare anyone, but we're all sitting in this room right now with billions of bacteria lining your skin and your nose and your mouth. And newborns make immune responses to those bacteria so that they don't harm them. And another thing, kids are dirty. So kids play in dirt and get cuts and scrapes, and gosh darn it, if they don't put everything that they can find in their mouths, all of these things challenge their immune systems. So, and I don't want to say that these are bad things. It's good for children to activate their immune system starting at a young age. And another point that's kind of important is the notion that maybe getting multivalent, so trivalent vaccines like the MMR, is bad because it induces 3 times the immune response. And just want to let everyone know that it doesn't actually increase the immune response. It just broadens it. So for example, if you think of your MMR shot as a syringe filled with 3 separate components, an orange, a red, and a yellow one, these will induce these memory B cells to orange, red, and yellow. These will make antibodies. And so you can think of this immune response as being a pie. And having measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines in one shot doesn't increase the pie. It just chops it into 3 pieces. All right, so another question that I actually get quite often, and maybe it's because I work with viruses in the lab, but is why do we need a flu shot every year? A lot of these vaccines we get when we're kids. Sometimes if they're not lifelong, you get a booster, but you got to go. Even as adults, we all go and we get our flu shot every year. So why is that? So first, I just want to tell you a couple bits of pieces of information about what causes flu. So it's caused by a virus that's called influenza. And the flu virus is named for its H parts and its N parts. So H actually stands for hemagglutinin, and N stands for neuraminidase. For the purposes of this, those terms are not really important, but just know that these H parts and N parts coat the outside of the virus like this. And they're so named because each H part and N part gets a number designation. And so an example, which many of you are probably familiar with from vaccines in the news, is H1N1. So when you get your flu shot, you induce memory B cells that make antibodies to these H parts and the N parts, so that when you get infected with this flu virus, it, like Rakina introduced, it binds it all up and prevents you from getting sick. So why again do we need a flu shot every year? Well, it's because flu is very, very smart. And flu virus changes. And so flu virus undergoes 2 main types of changes. The first is called drift. And this is a change in these H parts and N parts so they can't be recognized by antibodies. And so, for example, if we start off with a virus that has orange squares and red triangles, this virus can undergo a drift in which the orange squares are replaced with purple rectangles. So if you were vaccinated against this virus, there was a drift and you got infected with this virus, these red antibodies can still bind, they can still recognize. But now these yellow antibodies cannot. So this is not as good as a situation as I just showed you, where the virus is all bound up by antibodies. And in this case, the vaccine is probably partially protective. So you may get a less severe disease. Maybe your fever only lasts a day and you only have a cough for a couple days. Whereas in this case, you're fully protected. You may never even know you came into contact with the flu virus. The other kind of change that influenza virus undergoes is called the shift, and this is a much more dramatic change. And what happens here is when two different viruses recombine all of their parts, and what comes out the other end doesn't resemble either one. And so in this case, if you were immunized against either one of these viruses, but you got infected with this virus, your memory B cells in these antibodies cannot recognize this virus. And this virus is going to cause a full-blown flu infection. And that is exactly what happened a couple of years ago during the swine flu pandemic. So swine flu is also known as the H1N1 influenza. And it was a result of a combination of not even 2 flu viruses, but 3. A human virus, a swine, pig virus, and an avian, a bird virus. And they all came together to make this brand new virus that no one had any immunity to. And that's why so many people got sick, and a fair number of people actually died from this infection. But researchers and vaccinologists got together rather quickly and made a vaccine to this virus. And this was really a global vaccination effort that occurred very rapidly, because within a year of having this vaccine out, there were no new cases of swine flu, essentially anywhere. Okay, so the final question, which is kind of more of a hypothesis at this point, but is why don't we have an HIV vaccine? So HIV is human immunodeficiency virus. It is the causative agent of AIDS, or acquired immune deficiency syndrome. And I'm sure I don't have to tell anyone in this audience, it is a global health crisis. In some parts of the world, the frequency of HIV infections can be as much as 30% of the population. That's 1 out of every 3 people infected with this virus. So why don't we have a vaccine? Well, one of the reasons we don't have a vaccine is, like flu, HIV can change. But HIV is actually even smarter than flu, because I showed you in the flu example, this virus may change to one other virus, or something very similar virus. Within an infection, HIV that looks like this can make many copies of itself that all look different. And so what happens is that there are millions of different HIVs that then come out. And it's been quite a hard task to either try to predict the viruses that are going to come out, or in some cases, researchers have made vaccines, and then HIV has changed other parts of its components so that it can evade protection. The second reason HIV we don't really have a good vaccine, or a vaccine for HIV, is really the way it's transmitted through the population. So HIV can be, and for the most part, is a sexually transmitted disease. And so for protection against infection, it will be really, really important to have these memory B cells and these antibodies and these memory T cells in the genital tract, because once HIV gets in, there's no stopping the fact that you're infected. This is known as mucosal immunity, because it refers to a mucosal tissue. And I'm going to now hand the laser pointer over to Will. He's going to talk a little bit more about what is mucosal immunity, and then also talk about ongoing research in the future of vaccines, particularly in regards to mucosal immunity. So thank you.
Thanks. So moving right along, we'll discuss one more concept of the immune system, and then talk about the future and then what scientists are doing to make vaccines better. Just to let you know, this is a small enough group that if you guys have a question, or if I say something that's confusing, that's fine. Just raise your hand, cut me off. We'll talk it out. So So in this slide, I just wanted to show off the beautiful human body and how we as researchers like to divide it into different systems. And so essentially, this is the way that scientists and immunologists look at the human body. And what we are primarily focused on are these organs. So the yellow ones right here, the thymus and the bone marrow, are where your immune system cells are born. This is where all of the components of your immune system originate, they mature, and then they circulate around your body throughout your blood vessels, as well as through a system of vessels known as the lymphatics. And this is what protects your body. So you have all of these cells, they're circulating around, and they do a wonderful job of keeping you from getting infections and keeping you disease-free. However, you'll also notice that there are these little blue dots scattered throughout the body, and these are known as lymph nodes. And so whenever you get sick and you go to the doctor's office, they'll always start feeling around right back here on your neck. And what they're doing is making sure if your lymph nodes are swollen. I don't know if that's ever happened, but what they're checking for is a sign that you've got an infection. And so whenever you get an infection, all of these cells that are circulating around your body, they all congregate and they all start hanging out in these lymph nodes. And so what they'll do is they'll actually start to swell up with cells. And this is the immune system, or rather a sign of the immune system getting activated. And so that's actually a really nice, easy way to see if you're getting sick. Are these lymph nodes, a couple right here in your neck, are they getting swollen? Is your immune system getting activated? So it's actually a really easy way for doctors to tell if you're getting sick. But one thing that I think that we have overlooked until relatively recently are all of these immune tissues that you can't necessarily feel from the outside of your body. And they exist more in, let's say, this system of your body. So here we have in blue the organs of the respiratory tract, your mouth, your nose, your lungs. And in red, we have the gastrointestinal or digestive tract, and those are your guts, your stomach, your intestines, that sort of thing. And it turns out that there are far more immune cells that are associating or hanging out with these tissues than there are immune cells that are circulating around your blood. And so what we realize now are that you can really divide the immune system into two different parts. So one, the scientific term is the systemic immune system, and that's the one that involves all of the cells flowing around your body in your blood. The other system, though, is the mucosal immune system, and those are the cells of the body that protect your lungs, your genital tract, and your gastrointestinal or your digestive tract. And it turns out that that is actually far more important in keeping you from getting sick. Because when you think about it, how do you usually get sick? Do you get sick because somebody comes after you with a syringe full of disease and jabs it into your blood? No, you get sick by hanging out with her. She's going to sneeze in your face, or not even in your face, just somewhere in the room. And then you walk in a couple minutes later, and there are viruses, there are bacteria floating around anywhere. And what happens? They all get in through your lungs. And so what the virus will then have to do is cross through these mucosal tissues, and then they infect your body that way. Well, what's protecting your body from there? That's the mucosal immune system. So it's this team of cells that protect all of those spit-filled tissues that are all over your body. Here we have a lovely salad, and I just wanted to point out that the other main way that you get infected is through your food. And so we've all heard about meat recalls in the country, as well as vegetable recalls now. So spinach, peanut butter, tomatoes, they infected with bacteria, and then all of a sudden it's very unsafe for us to eat because you eat it, you ingest it, and then all of a sudden you've got some pretty nasty pathogens in your stomach. So, and then if the sneeze picture didn't convince you, I hope this slide will. You really need a good, strong mucosal immune system because some of the most devastating diseases in the world will attack you through those mucosal layers. So first and foremost would be acute respiratory infections. It's just a fancy term for things like flu.